Okay, let's talk about Reanimal because this is one of the more conflicting survival horror experiences you're likely to have this year. And I've been going back and forth on it quite a lot since finishing it. On paper, this one has a lot going for it. It's made by Tarsier Studios, the team behind the first two Little Nightmares games, and those are titles a lot of people really love. And it shows because Little Nightmares 3 was, well, yeah. These two are stylish, atmospheric, and very good at creating this constant feeling of unease. So naturally, expectations were pretty high going into this one. And in some ways, Reanimal absolutely delivers on its promise of a great survival horror experience. In other ways though, yeah, it comes up short. Now if you played Little Nightmares, you'll feel right at home here. The structure, the pacing, and the visual language, it's all very familiar territory. Now that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and there's just enough new material here to stop it feeling like a straight copy, but the influences are unmistakable. If anything, this very much feels like a spiritual successor to those games. The problem is that it also inherits some of the same limitations, especially when it comes to length and replay value. Now, the game lasts about 2 to 4 hours, depending on how much you explore and how casually you play. And honestly, if this were priced lower, I probably wouldn't have an issue with that at all. Because short, tightly focused horror games can be really great. The problem is, Reanimal costs £35, and on top of that, there's a £20 expansion pass planned. At that point, it's really hard not to question the value of what you're actually getting here. Especially when you look at what else is available in that same price range, particularly in the indie space, where you're often getting far more content and depth for a lower cost. It just makes Reanimal feel a bit overpriced for what it actually offers. Now to put in the context here, you can pick up titles like Hades 2 and Hollow Knight Silksong for the exact same price. Now these games in particular offer far more content and depth and shone as 2025's best games. Now away from that though, where the game really shines is in its presentation. Visually, this is a beautiful game. The art direction is unmistakably macabre. It's dark, unsettling, and consistently impressive. Every area feels carefully designed, and there's this constant sense of dread hanging over everything. It's clearly drawing from Little Nightmares, but it still manages to establish its own identity too. Now when you're moving through these decaying environments, surrounded by disturbing imagery and strange creatures, the atmosphere works perfectly. And this is where Reanimal is at its strongest. Now, story-wise, you play as a brother and sister searching for their missing friends in a hostile, broken world. You travel by foot and by boat, slowly uncovering fragments of what's happened, mostly through environmental storytelling or silent cutscenes rather than direct exposition. The narrative is intentionally vague and it doesn't explain everything to you. And personally, I really like that because it trusts you to piece things together yourself. The ending in particular is going to be a bit of a double-edged sword for some people, although I personally think it's handled pretty well. It brings together a lot of the ideas introduced earlier in the game and builds towards a conclusion that feels emotionally satisfying, even if it is a little abrupt. And when it's over, you do find yourself wishing there was a bit more, which again is both a compliment and a frustration. Now in terms of gameplay, I mentioned this earlier, but Reanimal sticks very closely to the Little Nightmares formula. You explore environments, you solve light puzzles, and when I say puzzles, that word is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. You survive chase sequences, occasionally fight bosses, and you collect secrets along the way. None of this is bad, it's all pretty functional, but very little of it actually feels new or innovative. And in fact, when you reach the midway point of this one, a lot of the levels start to feel quite samey in terms of structure. Now one of the more interesting additions though is the use of vehicles, especially the aforementioned boat. When you're out on the water and you can see the environment stretching endlessly in every direction, it really sells the scale of the world. It makes your characters feel small and vulnerable, and when the game leans into that feeling, it's genuinely effective. Unfortunately, the controls don't always support that same ambition. The boat is incredibly clunky to control, and the harpoon aiming is unreliable at best. Now other vehicles like the ice cream truck are barely used at all, and they feel more like one-off on-rail ideas rather than fully developed mechanics, which is a bit of a shame. Some of the boss encounters do run into this similar problem. A few are memorable and others feel rushed and just tacked on for the sake of padding out the runtime. The spider boss here halfway through is a good example of this. It appears, builds some tension, adds a little bit of environmental storytelling, and then it just ends. Now more broadly, the middle section of the game starts to feel repetitive around this boss. Structurally, a lot of the chapters that follow the same pattern see you introduced to a threat, you slowly explore creepy environments, you solve a few puzzles, you maybe fight something, and then there's a chase. Rinse and repeat. Now even though it looks great, all of this just starts to blur together. None of this is really helped though by the fact that exploration is fairly limited. Most areas are tightly controlled and there's very little room to experiment or approach things differently. A lot of the mechanics are refined versions of ideas already seen in Little Nightmares, which include moving objects, finding tools to open previously locked areas, basic stealth sections, and a little bit of combat. Again, none of this is terrible, it just feels very safe. Now I mentioned combat before, and the game does try to introduce more direct combat through the use of a crowbar. Unfortunately, it rarely feels good. Gunplay is awkward as well, and that's before even mentioning the harpooning, which again is unreliable. And when you're fighting flying enemies like seagulls, those issues become even more obvious. And the combat never really becomes something you look forward to, it's just something you kind of tolerate to get through to the next section. Now the audio design here is fine, but it's not particularly memorable. The soundtrack relies heavily on ambient tension and minor key strings, but none of it really stands out. It does its job, sure, and there's some limited voice acting, but honestly I'm not convinced it adds much. This is a game that probably would have worked better without it. And this is, again, where everything circles back to the price. If Reanimal were cheaper, I'd be much more forgiving on some of these issues. At a lower cost, this would feel like a solid atmospheric horror game with some rough edges. At £35 though, it's positioned as a premium product and it never quite earns that label. So overall, Reanimal isn't a bad game. There's a lot to like here, and the atmosphere is strong, the visuals are excellent, and the story has some genuinely effective moments. But it's too short, it's too familiar, and way too expensive. Unless you're a huge fan of Tarsier's work, I'd recommend waiting for a significant discount on this one. And at the right price, it's definitely worth playing, but at full price, yeah, this one's hard to justify. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.